Hi, my name's Kim. I am a licensed nationally certified East Asian medical provider and a Taoist practitioner. I've been talking about turbo cancers and been kind of avoiding it over the last few weeks because it's kind of a depressing topic, and I've been dealing with my own issues of what they like to call long haulers. And today, long haulers is going to encompass everything from injury from the infection, the natural infection, to injury from vaccines. So let's get back to it, because I'm wondering if in the United States, are we seeing this concept of excess deaths? Are more people suddenly dying than expected? And then I'm also curious, are we seeing more rates of cancer in this generation of 30 to 50-year-olds, in this younger generation? And is that higher than pre-pandemic levels? And then the last thing that I'm going to do is, they calculate these statistics in a certain way, and I'm going to talk about some of the concerns about these statistics because I think they might be understating the rate a bit. Okay, you ready to get going? Let's go. I spent all of last year, 2022, looking for mortality rates and incident rates for 2021 and 2022, and I couldn't find them. And I bring that up because there's been a lot of conversations on excess deaths and higher cancer rates, higher heart disease rates. It's a lot easier to have that conversation if you have the statistics, right? So I'm not saying that the government or the news media or the powers that be, that they were intentionally obfuscating the information. And I use that term because I think it fits so well with what this whole thing is because obfuscate is to blur the information, is to misdirect, is to mislead. And I'm not saying that they were intentionally doing that, but without putting those statistics out, we really couldn't have a rational discussion on excess death rates or higher cancer rates or higher heart disease rates. And, that's kind of sus, right? Let's start out with what's excess deaths. So today, excess death means deaths higher than pre-pandemic levels. And they're using 2019 as a base year for pre-pandemic. I compared 2018 to 2019. There is a 1% difference between the two numbers. So it's really insignificant, the changes between the two numbers. You could use those two, you could average those two, but in this episode, I'm just going to use 2019. My first question was, hey, do we even have excess deaths just in total? Because if we don't have excess deaths in total, then I'm just not even going to look at this. And so here are the statistics from the U.S. government. And these are the rates for 2022, 2021, and 2019. So 2019 is our base year. And you can see that the rate per 100,000 people is 715 people per 100,000 people. Now, in 2021, that is our highest rate, and that's when we had a lot of COVID going on. And then in 2022, we still have a high rate when we didn't have much COVID going on. So one of the things that the government gave me was the statistics or the estimates of deaths due to COVID. So I'm going to take those COVID numbers and I'm going to take that rate and I'm going to adjust it out. So for 2021 and 2022, this is the estimated rate per 100,000 people that died because of COVID. And let's adjust that out. And now here's where we end up, which should be more of an apples to apples comparison of the rate per 100,000 people dying in the United States. And you can see that we are still trending upwards. So let me show you the graph on this, because that is easier to see that we're still trending upwards, which is kind of interesting, huh? So it does look like we do have excess deaths. So it makes sense to see if I can dig into this a little bit more and find more information. The next numbers I was going to look at were the cancer statistics, because I thought, oh, okay, we know we have excess mortality. what about cancer statistics? And so I looked at the cancer statistics, and since I was out there, I was like, hey, let's look at the heart rates too, because heart disease and cancer, we think those are abnormally high, and we're saying that those are abnormally high because of the vaccines, right? So here's the rates that I got. And for heart disease, we can see that that one is increasing. That one makes total sense. And there's a report here which shows that heart disease in 2022 is up like 9%. So it's really increasing significantly. And you're like, well, 9%, how do I know that's significant? Well, to give you some clues, from 2010 to 2019, heart disease has been falling. It hasn't been as high as it is now since, like something like 2010. And if we looked at 2018 to 2019, those rates were basically the same. They were basically the same numbers. So we're seeing that the rate is going up, and it is significant, and it happened really quickly. So the other one is cancer. Okay. These numbers didn't make any sense to me at all. So these cancer statistics, and again, if I show you this web page from the CDC, you can see they stopped reporting on cancer incidence rates in 2020. Now, not saying anything. I'm just saying, guys, that looks kind of sus. So these rates, the cancer death or the cancer mortality rates, they all looked all the same. And I think part of this is that issue that I'm going to talk about later about using the average age to get your rate per 100,000. But I'm like, I can't do anything with these rates. So, hey, why don't we look at new cases of cancer, and let's see if we can see anything there. Okay, so here are the new cancer diagnoses, and this is the total number of diagnoses. So this is a pure actual number. This isn't a statistically manipulated average age per 100,000. Now, the only thing that I did on this was I divided the total incidence, the total number of new diagnoses by 1,000 to make it a smaller number so it's easier to look at. Okay, so we can see in 2019, 1.7, that's the base year, 1752.8. And then if we look at 2022, we can see that it's 1918. Okay, now green is good, red is bad. And I wanted to say, let's look at the percentage change. And we can see that the percentage change is increasing. So in 2021, 8.3% cases of new cancers. In 2022, it's 9.4%. So it's increasing. Now, remember they said that people weren't coming in during the pandemic year of 2020, and we see a huge decrease in new cancer diagnoses of 8.4. Okay. And maybe that's the issue in 2021 is they're getting diagnosed in 2021. Either way, the rate is still going up because that wouldn't have been the issue in 2022. So we're seeing a higher rate of cancers, of new cancer diagnoses. And why is this? Is this really significant? I mean, 9%, yeah, you're going, well, yeah, that is significant. And it is significant because I think our population only changed 1% from 2019 to 2022. So we have a 1% change in population and a 9% change in new cancer diagnoses. Something significant has changed. You have the numbers now. We have excess deaths. We have excess heart disease deaths. We also have a lot more new cancer diagnoses. But what they've been saying is that we're seeing an increase in this younger generation. And, when we first started talking about excess deaths, they were trying to push the narrative of, hey, you know what? This is the boomers. They're fading away. Well, they're not pushing that narrative any longer. I'm going to show you why. And then there's been this discussion that we're seeing a lot more deaths in these younger generations where they shouldn't be dying. Historically, they shouldn't be dying. the social dilemma has sprouted up. The news medias have been all over this, helping us understand that cancer rates in the younger generation have been increasing, and they're pointing to this research study that studied data up to 2019. It was something like 2010 to 2019, and they found that, yeah, the rates are increasing by something like 1%. So it's a great report because now we have a historical document which everybody is looking at, which has said that cancer rates have only increased by 1% for that under 50 crowd. That doesn't explain the 9% increase in cancer diagnoses in 2022. Here's the data that you really want. Look at this is mortality statistics by age group, and it's for all mortality. So it isn't by incidence, but it's by all mortality. So what I'm thinking is that we should see less boomers passing. Well, if the narrative of media and news was correct, we should see an increase, a big increase in boomers passing, right? And then they're saying that cancer rates are increasing by 1%. So we should see maybe a 1% increase in this younger generation passing. Okay, here's the data. It looks like a bunch of numbers. I can see your eyes glazing over. I get it. But you know what? I'm going to give you another eye glazing chart. This, I took out all the COVID numbers. Okay. So now these should be more apples to apples. This is no COVID in here. And now I'm going to take those numbers and I want to see the percentage increase over 2019. And I've got this beautiful chart for you. It's color coded. So red is bad, blue is not as bad, and green is, wow, you guys got the lotto. You're winning. Okay. If the mortality rate increased by 10% or more, your number's red. So over 2019, if you increased 10% or more, your number's red. If you increased 1 to 9%, you get a blue number, because that's not so bad when you consider these massive increases. And then if you're actually under 1, you get a green number. So who gets the green number? Amazing. I was not expecting this. The over 80 crowd. Well, the over 85 crowd. The boomers. They get the green number. Awesome, huh? Who is getting the worst? Who's seen the biggest percent increase in deaths? Well, let's just look at 2022. Do you see the two numbers that are over 20%? It's in the 25 to 34 and the 35 to 44. So this 25 to 44 year age range, they're seeing over 20% increases in deaths from the base year of 2019. They're seeing a lot more people dying, and they've been seeing that consistently. 2021, their numbers are still super high. And you know, the other group that's really high is those younger than 2025. They don't get the highest numbers, but their numbers are high. And you can see in the really young, the under 5, where their immune system has not been developed yet, their rates are increasing. So in total, this chart was pretty disturbing and pretty scary, but it did support what we were seeing, that there is an abnormal increase in deaths in the under 50 crowd, and that report on increasing cancers in the younger generation just doesn't cover it. That report indicated there was a 1% increase. This is astronomical. These generations are experiencing over a 20% increase in deaths. And that's probably why you and I are so much more aware of people passing away around us. I mean, just so many people that we know that are much younger than we expected are passing away. The last thing I wanted to talk about is about the statistics, about that age average rate per 100,000. And there's going to be a lot more people out here who actually are really good at math and can help me out here. But, they're using that age adjusted rate to say that they're comparing apples to apples. And if we look at the consumer price index is, they want to look at the exact same cart of goods. So 1 apple, 1 gallon of milk in, let's say 2000 versus 1 apple, 1 gallon of milk in 2024. And so they think by looking at the same things in the same amounts that they can get a better average. Now, one of the things that kind of analysis doesn't take into consideration is, how much our food's been degraded, right? And so, that 1 apple that you got in 2000 versus the 1 apple you got today, they've been degraded. So this apple was grown on fertile fields with farmers who are taking care of it, whereas this apple is probably in 2024 is probably being grown by some corporate farm which has degraded their soils and is cutting all their apples green and shipping them to market. So there's a piece of it that it can measure, and there's a piece of it that it can't measure. And I think that's the same with this age adjusted rate. I think because the amount of deaths have shifted significantly to this younger generation. So this younger generation was making up significantly less than they are today. So the younger generation made significantly less deaths than they are today. So if you're looking at these numbers and you're saying, okay, I'm going to age adjust this to some base year, any base year before the pandemic is going to have a lot less people in the younger generation passing. And when you have that, their numbers, let's say the amount of mortality in their age range is going to be misstated. It's going to come out lower. And the boomers, which are supposed to be having higher numbers of deaths right now, well, you saw from the charts that that's not true. It's the exact opposite. So they're having much lower numbers, and those lower numbers are going to get a much bigger weight. Okay, it's a messy conversation, but I think that these age-adjusted rates, they're helpful. They're very helpful. But right now, with what's going on with the pandemic, it can be a little bit misleading. And so I think the rates are actually much higher because we're seeing much higher deaths in a much younger generation. That generation is going to get a much smaller weight, and we're seeing lower deaths in an older generation, which is actually going to get weighted stronger. So it's going to misrepresent the numbers on both sides, giving us a lower rate. Now, when I say that, then think about the total death rates that we just looked at the beginning of this video, where we saw an increase already. But those death rates are probably understated because they understate how many young people actually passed. And being that so many fewer older people are passing, that number is also less. So I just bring that up right now because I use their average age rate per 100,000 to just say, hey, in general, are we seeing excess deaths? We are, but if that number is understated, we're seeing much higher excess deaths. Okay, that's just some thoughts. And, hopefully it helps you as you're thinking through how you're managing your life, how you're managing your health. And until next time, I will catch you on the other side.